Okay, so this is going to be my recap of Alias Grace Part 5. So it opens with Dr. Jordan going over McDermott's confession. He basically implied that Grace realized what she was doing when she said that God is going to damn her for her sins.
She uttered no cry, but she put her hand to her head and said,
God has damned me for this.
well, then you have nothing more to fear.
And so then he ends up asking Grace for a handkerchief where he strangles Nancy.
She gave it to me without a word. I tied the handkerchief around her throat in a single tie.
And then he takes the axe and he basically dismembers them. So Dr. Jordan is meeting with Reverend Veringer, and he's giving him an update and basically saying that he knows that it's in there somewhere and he's like close to helping Grace remember.
She knows. She might not know she knows, but buried deep within her, the knowledge is there.
Dr. Jordan basically said that everybody knows that Mrs. Humphrey's husband ran out on her, and it's unseemly for you to be living in this house with a single woman, and you need to find other accommodations.
If it becomes known that you were living alone with your landlady, your reputation.
So later that night, Mrs. Humphreys creeps into his room, and of course he woke up to try to figure out what she was doing, and she said she heard a noise. He was like, I didn't hear nothing, and he basically said that this can't continue, and then she tried to gaslight him like he didn't know what's going on, and basically said that, well, we don't need to stop something that never happened.
Nothing is going on, so nothing can stop.
So we get back to the house because Grace is also a maid there, and so she was talking to one of the other maids who had done some work at Mrs. Humphrey's house, and basically said that gave Grace the 411 about her doctor saying that him and Mrs. Humphreys have been staying at the house, just the two of them, for a while, and that her husband had ran out on her.
Husband ran off on her. And he seems to be taking fine care of her.
And she also said that Dr. Jordan needs to be careful because Mrs. Humphrey looks determined.
Dr. Jordan better watch himself. Because if I ever saw determination to get a man's trousers off him, it's there in her eyes.
And so while this is going on, Dr. Jordan is in the parlor giving a presentation on this connection between dealing with using dreams to help with amnesia and this, then the third.
There are those who have dedicated themselves to the study of hysterics. And the investigation of dreams is a key to diagnosis.
After the presentation, he was introduced to Dr. Jerome DuPont, aka Jeremiah.
Oh, Dr. Jordan, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Jerome DuPont.
It is a pleasure, Doctor.
Now, remember in the previous episode, we said he was going to stop being a peddler and get into being a hypnotist. So they talk, and he offered his assistance in helping with the treatment. Dr. Jordan is like, well, no, we're the crucial part in her treatment, and I don't want to do anything to derail that. And of course, all of these people who have gathered for this presentation are part of the people who want Grace to be pardoned. And so they were like, well, maybe if, him helping will move things along.
We all feel, all of us on the committee, that it would be to our advantage to do whatever we can to move things along.
And of course, he was adamant, like, no, he doesn't want to go that route. So while this is going on, Grace is in the kitchen, and she, felt that she heard a familiar voice. She walked in, saw Jeremiah, aka Dr. DuPont, and passed out. So as she was coming to, she saw Dr. DuPont and almost gave the game away, and then she realized that, this is one of his, games. So she kind of played along.
Tara, I could have laughed with glee.
But in the end, they end up couching that idea of him helping Dr. Jordan until later. So we get into she's kind of recalling the versions of events, the different versions of the story that's been told, and basically by the end of this, you don't really know what was true, what's not. So she basically said there's a lawyer's version and what she said in the court.
I remember what the lawyer, Mr. Mackenzie, said I should say, and what I said at the trial.
And then there's the stuff that she didn't say.
And what I did not say even to him.
And then she's saying there's the stuff that she said after. So I don't know if that's implying there's like 3 or 4 different versions of this story that's been told.
And what I said afterwards, which was different as well.
And she didn't really clarify which version is the truth. Basically, her memory is just a mess. So the first memory that she's kind of sort of remembers but don't know if it played out exactly was when Nancy fired her. So basically Nancy ended up what she told Kinnear, saying she was going to let Grace go. She ends up telling Grace that she was going to be let go at the end of the month and that she knows what she's up to and she can't wait to be rid of her.
Did she say,
Don't think I don't know what you've been up to. I will
pay you your wages on Saturday, and then you can be gone out of here.
And then the next clip she sees after that, McDermott comes in to console her. She's crying. And then he ends up saying that he has a secret to tell her and that she can't tell anybody.
Did he say?
I will soon make you think better of me. I will tell you a secret if you promise to keep it.
And then you have Kinnear. Then there's this clip of Kinnear kind of chasing her around the house. It's in the middle of the night, and he has this lantern, and we can only imagine what his plans were for that night.
Did he say?
I know you're hiding from me. Come out at once, or I will have to find you.
And then she said, basically saying that maybe this happened, maybe it didn't. So you don't really know at the end of all that what's going on.
It might have happened.
And then she ends up hearing Mary's voice saying, because she's lying in bed, like this is all like her memory, lying in bed, and Mary is basically saying, "Let her in."
You must unlock the door. You must open the window. You must let me in.
And so she's now doing her 5th session with Dr. Jordan. And so they're recounting the day everything happened. So Kinnear was going out of town. It was Thursday. He's supposed to come back on Friday. So while Grace was standing over by McDermott, he was sharpening the axe. Nancy came over and basically told him that she was letting him go tomorrow. That tomorrow would be their last day. They had to get out.
You're both to leave tomorrow. I'll pay your wages until now.
And so they're now sitting in the kitchen. And so McDermott does tell her that he has a secret to tell her.
I have a secret. You must promise not to tell anyone.
But then this time he told her what the secret was, that his plan was to basically knock Nancy and Kinnear off.
I'm going to kill Nancy with the axe. I'm going to shoot Mr. Kinnear when he comes back and take the valuables.
And so Dr. Jones was like, "Did you believe him?" And she was like, "Well, no, like nobody in their right mind would believe that." And then she said, "Did you warn anyone?" And then she was like, "Well, no, if I tried to say anything, then they would just chalk it up to me being this, crazy person, and no one would believe me." And so she said that she, basically tried to get him to delay. And you asked him how she did that. She basically said that if you do something to Nancy now, then people are going to wonder, where she is, and it's going to raise more questions if you do it now. And so he agreed to not do it that night. And so later that night, they're going up to bed, and Nancy asks Grace to sleep with her because she, again, doesn't like sleeping in the bed by herself when Kinnear's out of the house.
Grace, will you sleep with me tonight? I'm afraid of burglars.
So Nancy goes into the room. McDermott approaches her again, basically saying that it's going to happen tonight, that he's going to knock Nancy off that night. So they get into the bed, and she ends up telling Nancy, this is her version, that she ended up telling Nancy what McDermott had planned, but she basically said, of course he did. Like, she basically just chalked it up to McDermott being an ornery person, and this whatever. Like, she really didn't put any stock into it.
Nancy McDermott wants to kill you.
I should imagine he does.
And so later that night, it was unsure if she was dreaming or not, or if she was hallucinating. She ends up seeing Mary, and Mary is standing there. And she ends up opening the window. By the time she turns around, she opened the window to let Mary out. But when she turns around, Mary was gone. And then she had the glimpse of that dream where she had in the first episode where Nancy was standing picking roses, and then she collapsed. So the next day, she goes down to the kitchen, and McDermott is asking her where Nancy was. She was like, Nancy is getting dressed, and he has made plans that this is the day it's going to happen. And then she made the statement, well, for God's sakes, don't kill her in the room, because the carpet's going to be bloody, and, it's going to be a mess. And that kind of sparked Dr. Jordan's, looks like, what did you say? Like, almost like she was kind of rationalizing what he was going to do. It was weird, and it kind of caught him off guard.
For God's sake, don't kill her in the bedroom. You'll make the floor all bloody.
And so then you see the clip of basically him standing around. You saw where they showed the clip of him going out to get the axe. And you kind of see her standing around while he is disposing of Nancy's body. And then she said, well, that's what the lawyer told me to say. And then he asked about the handkerchief. And she was like, well, it was mine, but I don't remember giving it to him, or I don't remember, what happened to it.
It was mine. I know that. I have no recollection of giving it to him.
And so later that day, Kinnear arrived, and McDermott shot him. So, when he was dumping Kinnear's body down the cellar, Grace ran. He ran after Grace and took a shot at her, and she collapsed. Around this time, here enters Jamie and his testimony saying that she's saying that she had passed out, and she basically didn't know what happened. Jamie's account was when he came into the yard at 8 o'clock, she was actually up and at the water pump.
He said you were standing by the pump?
And that McDermott still had the gun, and he said that Grace told him that Kinnear had not come back yet and that Nancy went into town to see friends.
He said that you told him that Mr. Kinnear was not back yet and that Nancy had gone to see some friends.
And then she basically admitted that when they went to court, it was Jamie's testimony that sealed her fate that got her convicted. And so, Mrs. Humphreys, basically we see her later that night, and she got what she wanted. So they end up having a little situation. And that morning he left. So they're supposed to have their 6th session, but he ended up leaving to go take care of something.
Go to Toronto for work.
Please don't.
Please, I must.
And so Grace is saying that, basically saying that because they missed their session, and now this is basically a voiceover of her like finishing the story, of going over what she's going to tell Dr. Jordan the next time that she see him. So basically saying that she passed out, and her version of events, this is McDermott's version of events that she's telling now. She said that she passed out and that he had dumped a bucket of water on her face. And that they had drank some whiskey, basically celebrating what had happened. She's saying that the thing that she remembers that she woke up in the car with McDermott and she was wearing Nancy's dress.
What I remember is waking up to a beautiful night. I was in Nancy's clothes.
So basically he had dressed her. And so the next thing you know, she passes out and she comes to, and McDermott is on top of her, basically trying to SA her.
Right, you were the one that asked me to stop the wagon. Look, you were the one that invited me onto your show like the hot bitch that you are.
She fought him off, and he basically said that, oh, so you really are a good girl, so I guess I'll just have to, wait until we're married. So they get into town. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. He decides that he wants breakfast. He had money in his pocket and he wants breakfast. So he's banging on the door for these people to wake up at the crack of dawn to make him breakfast. So they're sitting there eating breakfast. And he keeps making it seem like he did all this for her. Like she wanted this to happen, and so that's why he did it. And she had promised that she was going to be his if he did this for her.
I've done all of this for you because you asked me.
And so she started reaching for her handkerchief. She was like, well, what happened? She's like, she can't find her handkerchief. And then he ends up telling her that it was you used it but he's saying that she used it to strangle Nancy.
I must have left my white kerchief behind.
The one with the blue flowers. It is keeping the sun off Nancy's neck. You ought to remember seeing as how you yourself pulled it tight inside the knot.
But of course, she has no recollection of this. So they eventually take off. They make it to the ferry, and I forget the next town they had gone to. And so he comes to her room at that night and basically saying that they would be married in the morning. And she basically told her no, she wasn't going to marry him. And he basically threatened her and said, called her a bunch of names. And she basically said she wasn't going to do it. So she went to bed that night. Not long after, the all police officers basically kicked her door in, grabbed her and McDermott. They were in separate rooms. And that is basically how they were captured. So, like I said, a lot happened in this episode. For all that I put in here, I had to leave quite a few things out because for time constraints. And yeah, a lot happened. And at the end of this, we still don't know what is the actual version of events. So I'm going to end this here.